Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming today for our August webinar. We are so excited about today's topic, and we're going to dig in a second. Emily, can I have the next slide, please? So, as you all know, I'm the CEO of Milo Associates. We focus on customer success and professional services recruitment. We recruit for individual contributors, middle management, executive, and C suite roles. And we have multiple ways we do it. We have a full service recruitment, obviously, service that we do. We have application review services, which is more like fractional recruiting, where we help review resumes in house. And then we also have a CCO program to help kind of get that fractional skill set if you need that. And we have these monthly webinars. We're at a lot of conferences. We're going to be at Turn Zero this year. We're going to be in New York this year. We have a lot of fun stuff coming. So hopefully we'll get to see you in person if we haven't yet. And just a little bit about me. I went to the University of Illinois. I started Milo Associates about 8 years ago, which is pretty wild. And I launched my personal brand last year. It's all about professional development and taking action and getting to your goals. So if anyone has any questions about that, let me know. And then I've been recognized in the space, which is always really nice. So I appreciate that. Thank you so much. I'm going to actually hand it over to Emily in a second. But we are so excited for you all to be here today. I actually met Emily last year at Churn Zero. We briefly met, and then actually most of our conversation has been virtual, and it's been amazing. I've learned so much from her. I think it's been so cool to see her career going from like an executive in CS to a CRO. And she's an advocate for Milo Associates. We've learned so much from her and appreciate her insights and seeing the way she's grown her career and all the value that she's brought to her current company. She was like, gracious enough to share a little bit about that today. And we're going to learn a lot. Please ask questions. Please let us know your thoughts. You can engage throughout the entire webinar. We have a Q&A section, so please use it. We will get to Q&A at the end, but don't lose the thought that you have. We're so lucky to have Emily here today. I know she's insanely busy, so thank you so much for your time today. And I'm going to hand it to her so we can learn from her. And please engage as much as you'd like. Thank you so much for being here, Emily. I'm going to hand it to you.
Thank you so much, Swati. It's an awesome topic, and it's something that I think from many different folks, myself included, for a period of time, the transition from more of a customer success orientation to a what you can kind of consider a sales orientation feels like a bit of a leap. That being said, if we're actually thinking of the role CRO as a revenue organization, then it becomes a bit more accessible. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about my experience. You're going to get a little bit more of my experience, especially considering Milo Associates and their mission and charter. Recruiting and talent development is super important. If you've worked with me before, you know that I have a passion for growing folks inside of their careers and beyond their current careers. So I'll give you a little bit of a taste of my philosophy there as well, and it'll help anchor your understanding of why I believe that CS leaders make great chief revenue officers. And so if we as we go through today, I'm going to give you that kind of modern career philosophy. There's that historical, you start at the bottom, you climb your way up to the top career ladder idea. I have a slightly different take on that. The qualities and quantities of CCO versus CRO to kind of give us a sense of what those roles really entail and start to identify some of the similarities that exist there. And then why I think CS leaders are closer than they think to managing and leading the whole revenue function. So I'm Emily Ryan. As you may know, I'm the Chief Revenue Officer at ScaleSec. ScaleSec is actually a services company. We are a consulting firm focused on cloud security and compliance, and we work with all sorts of different companies, anything from stealth startups to Fortune 500 industries. So our team has been around for almost 10 years now and has been truly focused on growing businesses through secure solutions. I was brought on to join the co-founders at ScaleSec last year, and I actually knew the CEO of ScaleSec from a role that I had, nearly 10 years ago now. No, 8 years ago. She and her co-founder brought me on to help specifically support and accelerate the growth of the business to meet the next revenue milestone. And that was a really exciting opportunity for me because as a formerly chief client officer, as a co-founder myself, as a team member who'd worked across CS strategy and operations and had run global operations for large public companies, I felt like this was a great opportunity for me to formally expand my title and start traipsing into that marketing and sales ecosystem that is part of the CRO role. But first, I want to talk a little bit about some of the aspects of my career philosophy. And this is a constant work in progress. I am always learning, not only just about the world and life in general, but about myself and about others, other people's perspectives, how much the same we all are, where we're different, and honoring those differences. So I gave a talk about 10 years ago now on making a brilliant career move. And if you've been to my LinkedIn, you've probably seen it as a blog post featured on my LinkedIn page, which I'll post again towards the end of the talk today. But I break down thinking about your next career move into two major aspects: your must-haves and your strengths and weaknesses. And as I've been learning and going through the process of my own career growth and my own career experience, I've realized that, every job, every life, every relationship, you're going to kind of run into kind of crappy days or hard weeks or even really challenging months. And there's always some kind of core thing or things that makes it so that staying with that company or relationship or life goal is still makes sense, right? In spite of it being hard. And I call these must-haves. So some folks maybe refer to these as values, but I think these are more directly core to your role or the business that you're working with or for. And so these are 3 to 5 aspects, and I try to keep it short. I only have 3 that must be true for you to feel connected to and fulfilled by the work that you're doing. So this also functions as a sanity check, right? When you're really feeling like, maybe it's time to move on, I always check in with my must-haves first. Are the things that need to be true still true for me? And if they are, sometimes I consider my strengths and weaknesses. So I'll talk about those in a second. So when I am checking in with my must-haves are that I need to be working with great people. The people that I surround myself with at work, since I work a lot, need to be interesting, three-dimensional, kind, driven, smart, and they need to help me be a better person. The second thing is I need to have an impact. I need to feel like the things that I am doing matter. And that can vary depending on the role, right? Sometimes the thing that I'm doing matters just to my team, and that's still an impact. Sometimes I get to do something that matters to the whole company or to a whole set of clients, and that counts as impact for me as well. So as long as I'm in command of some level of impact, then that is meeting my must-have. And then I need to be learning. And so actually the transition from CCO to CRO was perfect for this. I'm constantly learning. I'm learning from our vendors. I'm learning from our team members. I'm learning from the market. I'm learning from my own experiences. And that ability to continuously be checking in with learning allows me to feel grounded in the work that I'm doing. And so these are some of the things that, aren't necessarily your job, but they're part of how the company works, how the culture works, how you are empowered inside of what you do. Secondary is the idea of strengths and weaknesses. And this is actually, I realized my asterisk, my little guy got deleted at the bottom. Sorry about that. The asterisk refers to a book called Now Recognize Your Strengths. I believe that's the title. And this really breaks down strengths and weaknesses into activities. And it is, if you know Marie Kondo, the whole purge your life based on what brings you joy. This is joy for your work. So what am I proficient at is usually what we think of as I'm good at this, so it is a strength. And that's an aspect of a strength. But the great thing about humans is that we can actually get good at anything we practice. If we practice something over and over and over again, we will become proficient at it, even if we dislike it, right? So this is where I love this new definition of strengths and weaknesses. Strengths are things that make you stronger, activities that get you into flow, or that you could lose track of time because you're doing them. And it's a joyful experience. Weaknesses, even if you're very proficient at these things, they drain you. They're the things that you kind of drag your feet to go have to do. They're things that, constantly you push to the bottom of your to-do list. So by thinking about your role and your career and your job in these two facets, you can figure out what it is that you need to be doing or where you need to be and be empowered to hit your must-haves. And then you can work with your leadership and yourself to tune your role to align with more strengths and reduce the number of weaknesses. Spoiler alert, I have never found a job yet where I had no weakness areas because there's always something that you have to do, right? I do a lot of bookkeeping and accounting and finance. Not my favorite thing, but it's part of the job. So another tool that I've come across, and this is an interesting one, especially for this talk today. So we're thinking about our core must-haves that helps us anchor in the role or in the company. We're thinking about our strengths and weaknesses, the things that we like to do, and that will become critical when we think about being a CS leader. But this career ladder is a tool that I was given by a former mentor and manager in a previous role. And we were talking about what my career ladder had looked like. And so this is a great way, a very simple tool to build the visualization of what you've already learned and what you eventually need to learn to get to that next role. So it's helpful for identifying gaps if you're going after a specific role. You'll notice here, this is actually one of my career ladders. You'll notice this is for the path to COO, which I'm going to talk a little bit about why I typically don't follow the typical career ladder. But this path to COO starts way back when I started as a client services engineer, goes through each of my roles, and underneath each role, I've added what I've learned during that role. So new competencies, nothing is duplicative here. And then I'm able to say, what do I think my next role or two need to be? And what are my gaps? So this can also show you other options. So if you are bullish on becoming chief client officer and you fill this out and you realize, actually, I have a lot of the right skills to become a chief revenue officer. That can be an enlightening moment to see where you want to align your must-haves and your strengths with the skills and activities that you already have. But I'm going to take a step back and tell you about my career, because it hasn't really been a career ladder. It's been a bit more of a career rock wall. And this is important because as I've gone through my career, every single part of my job experience has built context for how I think about work, how I think about value, how I think about customers, how I think about getting it done. And it really starts, if you can see on the far left here, that's me inside of Field of Green. This is where I grew up. Very, very rural northern Idaho. There's a funny meme that says, when I say I'm from a small town, people think it's 62,000 people. Well, the town that I grew up in actually had 300 people in it. So a very, very rural vibe. But my parents were both extremely, had great work ethic. My father worked at a lumber mill. He's an electrician. My mother was a stay-at-home mom who also worked occasionally. And when she worked, she was in graphic arts. She sometimes worked for the school. She volunteered a lot. But both of them had great work ethic. And my mother is now an entrepreneur and has her own business for the last 20 some years. And that really instilled in me not only that work ethic was important, but also how to think about work as a thing that you get joy from. You'll see in the middle, I moved to New York City, right out of that little town of 300 people, to New York City to be a film and independent media producer. Very different job. I ended up doing great things with my career, learning new tricks, becoming a triathlete. You can see there I ran the nation's triathlon, moved to the West Coast as part of a transition into technology. That's a whole other story. If you want to send me a note, I'm happy to tell you my why from transitioning from film into tech. But transitioning to tech took me on global tours. This picture is of me in India. I lived in San Francisco. I got to still be creative and do dance and be a singer. And now I live in Colorado with my husband and our two immense dogs, who often make appearances in my screen here. But the reason that I'm showing you some of these different facets is that each one of these things, right? When I was a child, I was an actor and I learned how to be really creative, how to be really iterative, how to understand that the show must go on. I also learned how to think about my career as success on a spectrum. So it wasn't just one point in life that was going to make me feel successful. It was, if I am doing anything on or near a set or stage, I will feel success. That led me to New York City, where I was on or near lots and lots of sets or stages. While I was doing that, I was working a ton of other jobs. I was learning other things. I was incorporating new ways of thinking about discipline with sport, or thinking about agile methodologies, even when I was a filmmaker. Then that transitioned me into technology, where I started as a support engineer. That's where that career ladder comes in. I added that account management. I became a director of operations. I added a leadership position over customer success. And each of these, if you're thinking of that ladder, has a unique set of information that I learned, including starting my own business in film, which taught me how to run a business. So while we're thinking about what are all of the stacks of things that you've learned, and we want to think about what are the qualities of a CCO, or a CS leader, right? CS leaders and CCOs are revenue retention and expansion experts. They are focused on being strategic and proactive with customers. They are customer evangelists. They're very customer centric. It's required for the job. They're data-driven because you can't know all things all the time unless you're pulling in information and interpreting that information and becoming more and more prescriptive and predictive about it. And they're really focused on the whole post-sale experience. So once the customer has agreed that they need value from your firm, it is the CCO's role to ensure across all of the value delivery that the ecosystem is unified and the customer is at the center of it. So whether, and it varies by company, but generally CCO is over onboarding, CSM, support, professional services, education, operations. So if we think about all of those things and imagine that you've got a career ladder and it has checked all of those boxes so far, or it's the next step for you. When we're looking at Chief Revenue Officer, we're also looking at a strategic revenue leader, but this is a revenue generation leader. So this includes not only expansion, but also identification of value, information about helping the customer recognize that they have a pain that we can solve, and bringing those folks into a unified customer journey across the entire customer life cycle. And so these folks are also strategic, but they tend to be very visionary. As a chief revenue officer, you're thinking about the whole business and the market dynamics that are out there that are impacting your business and your business's ability to deliver and drive value for your customer base and your potential customer base. You're looking at a much more long-term outlook. So some folks say, well, a CRO is just the same as a VP of sales or a head of sales. And I would say that sometimes that can be true. Sometimes that's how the role evolves. But generally, a sales VP has to be very short-term focused. They're focused on this month, this quarter, solving this year's revenue goals and getting their sales engine moving at a pace. Now, that is a component of the Chief Revenue Office, but it is not the only component. Chief Revenue Officer has to be more strategic and more visionary with a long-term outlook. Now, that long-term outlook, of course, is still customer-centric because we cannot market or sell or deliver to our customers unless we know truly who they are. And that also means that we have to be data-driven. The data that is part of the customer success lifecycle is actually very complementary to the data that is part of the marketing lifecycle. And if you think about the marketing and the customer success data inputs and outputs, really it's about identifying what are the customer needs and what are the opportunities to highlight new ways of extracting value from our product or services. And so this role, this organization, this revenue office is designed to unify the whole customer experience beyond just post-sale, from the moment that the customer recognizes that that they have a pain, all the way through recognizing that your company can solve that pain, that they want to invest in that solution, and that they want to continue to get investment in that solution over time. And so this often is across marketing, sales, customer success, and revenue operations. Sometimes it is also either directly associated with or dotted line to product and finance. Often the revenue officer has to be at very least a strategic partner to the product ecosystem or the services definition, because they're the ones that are looking at the whole market and the whole growth profile. Finance is also critical because that's where you're making plans, you're getting that long-term outlook beyond the short-term facets there. So as we're continuing to think about this, right, we're thinking about our own ladders here, and we look at what does it mean to step toward the revenue office. Well, we're all used to this bottom part of the hourglass. We're used to adoption and retention and expansion and advocacy. Those are all the things that heads of CS and CS team members operate in every single day. Now, if you flip that upside down, you end up with a lot of the same types of things. You end up with a need to kind of see what is going to engage a potential customer. Well, those are going to kind of align back to what keeps a current customer engaged. Education, that's all over the adoption lifecycle. Understanding how value can be exchanged, having trust, understanding how you can justify that with what your roadmap is versus what the customer's needs are, and then actually having the rubber hit the road. And so if we're looking at this for folks who are trying to step into the revenue office, it's really an inflection of what we're all already used to doing here. I only have a couple more slides, I promise, but I want to go back to this career ladder. So we've talked a lot about what is the Chief Customer Officer role? What are you focused on? And what is the potential next step for a Chief Revenue Officer? So if we think about our career ladder, what do we already know? We know about how to identify and define customer value. We already have customer empathy, and we know how to support customers. We know how to retain revenue, and we know how to expand revenue. We understand operations and scalability. We know how to engage customers, probably in a very similar way to how marketing engages the ecosystem, if not at the same exact partnership with marketing. And we have a strategic imperative for execution and growth. And so if we're filling in our career ladder and now we're saying what is next, well, what matters? What are the facets that take you from chief customer officer to chief revenue officer? Well, we've already got gross revenue retention and net revenue retention. We've already learned how to define customer value. We've already learned how to realize customer value. And we've already built strategic customer value expansion motions. So now we need to tack on how to think about new revenue. So this is also customer value definition, but it goes deeper into, I've not only defined it, but the customer now agrees that that is the value that they need, and they are willing to pay for that value investment. And so that aspect and those features, nice thing about being a chief revenue officer is that you have to understand why those are critical to your business and how to get them moving. But often you will partner with a thoughtful sales leader to execute that. New customers, they need to understand that they have a pain and then see perceived value in your product to solve that pain. Customer value definition, all through all three of these. And then finally, the market value interpretation. So how is the market shifting and what does the market value? How is the market thinking about AI today versus some other system in the future or some other system in the past? And so those market dynamics are critical. And so if you think about this and you say, okay, I know this net revenue retention, this gross revenue retention space, I can partner with someone to ensure that we're getting that all the way through the sales cycle so that all of our customers coming in have a better experience overall. And we're getting that even farther in the process to the marketing engine. Now, all we've done is we've tethered the entire customer life cycle together. And so beyond that, I think that the reason that chief customer officers make great chief revenue officers is they are already managers and leaders. They are also already empathetic. They're results focused. They're people oriented. They are able to collaborate. They are able to consider a customer journey across many different facets. And they are able to have a great daily attitude, right? When we're dealing with customer issues that maybe we didn't cause or had nothing to do with, we need to be able to empathize and relate and stay buoyant. And as leaders, I think that chief customer officers and CS leaders are the most well suited to step into that revenue motion. They just need to understand a little bit more about that top of funnel and how to relate all of those things to a business. But I would suspect that everyone on this call has some aspects of their career that they can put into that kind of ladder format. But I would urge you to think about your whole career, everything that you've ever done, all of the work that you've done. Have you worked at a grocery store? Have you worked at an Old Navy? Have you worked at a coffee shop? How does that information inform how you think about marketing, how you think about customers, how you think about sales? Don't forget all of those facets of what you know and what you've learned. And remember that not every path is linear. In fact, most of them are not. So I hope that was helpful. Swati, I'll invite you back and we can dig into some questions. But if you have any questions for me directly or you'd like to connect, I will post my LinkedIn for you. And I look forward to answering any questions for you.
Thank you so much, Emily. That was amazing. I definitely love the theme. I love the rock wall. I've never actually, um, we all know our paths aren't linear, but the way that you kind of explain that, I love that. I'm going to use that like a lot. So thank you for sharing that. And I also love the theme of your career, like you're being creative, learning, and joy is like really the three areas I got through your entire career. And I think that's really important to note as people are growing in their career, mid stage leaders. Like, I think having those are, I think, very good themes. And I think that's very forward thinking. You have a growth mindset, obviously. And I think that I think there's a lot that people can learn from that. So thank you so much for sharing. We're
Okay.
definitely getting some questions in the chat. We're getting some engagement. I love that. Thank you so much. We already have a couple questions. We're gonna do the fireside chat first, but please use this time to think of more questions, and we're gonna get to them at the end. So definitely keep kind of thinking through what questions you have for Emily, because we have time for that today. But this was awesome. So I kind of want to go back to you personally a little bit and just kind of understand, like, I know you talked really, really honestly diligently about the skills from going to a CCO to a CRO. What about your own career journey? Can you talk a little bit about that from a CCO to a CRO, and like what motivated this transition?
Absolutely, yeah. And just to kind of step into the last decade or so, so I mentioned that I did transition into technology, and started my technology career on the customer side of things. So I was a customer support representative. I moved into account management, which was really, it was customer success management, but it predated that moniker. And so I really learned the technology space from that post-sale seat at the table. As I grew in my career, I also was able to experience a ton of, getting it done with the operations role. And honestly, being one of the probably first folks, uh, I'll say on the planet, who was a customer success operations person. So defining what that meant and working with the new tools that were on the market really gave me a lot of exposure to how we need to think about customers, customer delight, delivering what we promised, delivering value, and doing that at a certain amount of scale. And so being in customer success was, I will say, partially a happy accident. But it allowed me to transfer a ton of skills from my previous role as a film producer, independent film and media producer, which you're like, how? What? Those are not the same thing. But especially in customer operations, a film producer basically takes something that may or may not exist, as a script, and staffs up for it and creates this thing that is highly valuable, and then tunes it into something that is deliverable, and does it in time, on budget, and with a ton of scale and unscaling, right? So you hire a bunch of people, you let a bunch of people go. So those muscles were kind of already part of my vocabulary. And being in customer success, I found very fulfilling. I also found it to be very fulfilling because it was kind of this Switzerland where you weren't the salesperson,
Yeah.
right? Or you weren't, and being a customer support engineer, man, do I empathize with anyone who has that role or anything like that role, because it is hard. Like, you have to get your personal drive from the joy of helping others. Otherwise, you will not survive in that role. But being customer success management, and the operations around that was fun because you got to be 100% strategic. You got to really think about your customers. You got to really think about what they were trying to do and help them do those things with the product. And if you were doing that really, really well, the happy byproduct of that was that they would expand and stay with you,
Mhm.
right? And so it's consultative sales, but we don't call it sales
We don't.
because
We do now a little bit.
we
Just a little
do,
bit.
yeah, moving. This is why I'm choosing that direction. Customer success needed to be what it was when it started. The transformation of technology from something that you literally purchased off of the shelf on a disk, or you bought from a company and installed into your servers, you owned that technology. And
Mhm.
so once you own that technology, it's really up to you whether or not you use
Mhm.
it, right?
Right.
It's like buying a car. Like, I sell you a car, you can park it in your garage, you can crash it on the street. Don't crash your car. I've
Yeah.
done
Don't
that too.
crash your car.
Got it. But it doesn't matter to me as a salesperson what you do with that car,
Mhm.
right? The transition, and honestly, like this device was a driver for it, in that folks went to work, our parents went to work, and their computer and their operating system and everything was just whatever it was. There really wasn't much of a user experience. It's like all of the old green DOS and,
Yeah,
frameworks. Then you get an app in your phone that is beautiful and interesting and like helps you navigate it. People are starting to get personal computers. They're starting to have experiences with technology that are interesting. And then you
yeah,
get Salesforce jumping into the market and starting to give software as a service where I no longer own the technology, I access the technology.
right.
So that's a great concept. The combination of the iPhone and Netflix and all of these different things made it so that now businesses are accessing technology instead of purchasing it. The side
Really good
effect of
point.
that was that they didn't realize that, hey, now the onus is on us to make this valuable for you. So enters customer success.
Yeah,
Because sales has a very, very specific remit that has a very, very specific set of actions and math behind it that needed to stay consistent. And support had another very specific set of outcomes that it needed to be able to be reactive to customer needs. And they needed someone whose entire job it was to help the customer do
yeah,
whatever they needed to do to get value from the product. So it's 10, 20 years later, the world has evolved.
yeah,
And what's happening in my perspective is that customer success is tying itself more closely to the revenue that it drives. I think it always tried to do that, but now it has language for it and it has metrics for it and it can measure how much revenue the customer success motion is driving.
yeah,
Now it is becoming part of not just the customer journey, but the customer revenue life cycle. And that was why it was so important to me to I won't say ascend, I will say expand across more of the customer life cycle, because I think that that's where most technology is going. We've got fun AI stuff that's coming out that will inevitably make product-led growth more of a reality. And we've got more scalable and repeatable customer success motions that are clearly tied to revenue.
mhm.
That is going to change the shape of the customer ecosystem in B2B SaaS.
Wow, that is, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. That's I love the holistic view of that. And I know this is something, I don't even know if you're aware of this, but the ability you have to explain your experience and how it's related to whatever you want to do next is remarkable. And I think that is why it seems like you've moved up the rock wall so well, is because that you can explain things so well, and you're also looking very, like, you're very forward focused, which is pretty amazing. So someone in the chat just said, I've never heard the evolution of CS explained so clearly. Nicole said that. So I agree. I think that was really, really well done. So thank you, Emily. I didn't even know I was going to get that lesson right now. I love that. We have, I'm actually, I have more questions, but the Q&A is blowing up and we have a question in the chat. Asha, if you could put your question in the chat in the Q&A, I would really appreciate that so I can just kind of go through it. But let's kind of jump to the Q&A because we have a ton of questions and I want to try to get through them if we can.
Yeah, thank
So
you.
the first one is, I love to read. Were there any books that helped you make this transition from CO to CRO easier?
That's an amazing question, and you might notice I'm standing in front of my bookshelf. This is one of my many bookshelves because I also love to read, and this is kind of curated primarily business books. Gosh, I think that there are a number of books that I have encountered that have really helped me think about the customer value overall. And a bunch of them are actually adjacent to negotiation and sales. So one book that I cite a lot is called Never Split the Difference. The subtitle is The Art of Negotiating as Though Your Life Depended on It. It's actually by a former FBI crisis negotiator named Chris Voss. And you'd think like, well, that's not going to teach me how to go from CCO to CRO. But I think that what that book really helped me do was reconnect the fact that as a person and as a customer facing person, my whole life, my whole day, my whole career is negotiating with others, right? It's deeply listening to my clients. It's deeply understanding and empathizing with their pain. And then it's trying to help them kind of give me what I need and be really happy about it. And so if you think about negotiation and you think about revenue office and you think about sales and you start to sweat and you go, I hate negotiating and I hate being on the spot and I really hate like trying to do contracts and I hate going to the car salesman and all of these like panic fear things happen in your head. That book is really helpful to ground you in the fact that everything we do all day, every day is negotiating. And it gives you a few helpful tips on how to reset your power as a communicator to help others with your negotiation skills. So that's the one I'll cite. But if you want my book list, connect with me on LinkedIn. I'll send you some more.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. The next one is, what was the biggest challenge you faced when you stepped into the CRO role?
I think this is the biggest challenge I face doing anything new, and that is getting back into a beginner mindset and being okay with the vulnerability. Right? I I got my MBA. I'm very grateful for that. That was a huge part of what gave me the confidence to step into this CRO role. I took some marketing classes. I had owned a business. I had done some selling. These are some things that I had experience with. And at the same time, I needed to step into this role and ask for help. I needed to step confidently into this role and say, I know I can do this, and I'm going to find the right resources to help ensure that I'm doing it the right way. I'm constantly learning. We have team members and vendors, and I read a lot. I go out into the internet and say, tell me the difference between, I don't know, inbound leads and outbound leads. And, it's like, I'm constantly researching. I think that that's probably the hardest thing, is to simultaneously be confident in your ability to learn, your ability to figure it out, your ability to use all of the things that are part of your career ladder that you've already learned, and be vulnerable enough to ask for help and be in a beginner mindset.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. I mean, I think it goes back to your growth mindset that you have, right? And the theme of learning throughout your entire career. So thank you. Thank you for sharing. I absolutely love this. And I think the way you think about just work is also something that I think a lot of people can learn from, right? It's not just like a job. Like I almost feel like, which I love extra, like I always call them adult extracurriculars, all the other things we do outside of our day job.
Yeah.
And I love that. But I feel like you almost like treat your day job as an extracurricular. You're like, how can I keep learning? How can I keep growing? How can I keep helping? And that's a really important mindset to have. So thank you so much for sharing and emphasizing that.
Well, if you think about it, so there's a book called it's by her last name is Vanderkam. I forget what her first name is off the top of my head, but it's called 168 hours. And that's how many hours we have in a week. And if you are sleeping any normal amount, let's say you eat up 56 hours of that, that's almost a third of your time sleeping. And then let's imagine that you have an amazing career and you only work 40 hours a week. Like, you're not left with a lot.
Yeah.
And so maximizing the value of the hours that you're left with your adult extracurriculars and family and life and all of the other things, personal administration, which by the way is the hardest. But that big chunk of your day in your work, and it's a major chunk of our adult lives, is so impactful to
Mhm.
how your life is lived. And, I have a bad habit of identifying with other people that they're doing a job that they are just doing and they don't actually enjoy it. I actually helped my husband after we got married. He was an accountant for 14 years and he went to work and he said, this is my job. And I said, I feel like you don't really like your job. And he said, well, nobody likes their job. And that's just not true. It's just
Mhm.
you have to think about your strengths and your weaknesses and align your role with the things that bring you joy. And
Yeah.
it is possible. And trust me, there are people out there. One of my instructors was somebody out there who loves accounting, like something that you are like, surely nobody loves this. It is a weakness for me. So I guess I'll just do it because I'm proficient at it. Give it to the person who loves it. They will
Yeah.
do it so much more
Mm.
creatively and buoyantly than you will, and they'll be faster at it while
Yeah.
you go do the thing that you're great at.
I love that. I definitely think that people can love their job and, like, love what they do, but it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of work to find it. It takes a lot of legwork, and, it takes a lot of time, and I think that if I agree with you, if you put the time and energy into it, you can find what you love. So, thank you. The next question is, are there any specific training or development areas that a CCO should focus on before making the transition to a CRO role? I love that.
Yes. I do think having clarity on the marketing life cycle is important. When I got more clarity on the marketing life cycle, I was actually really floored by how similar to the customer success life cycle it actually is. But understanding the language that's happening in that space, understanding the basic concepts and why those things are important and why they're tried and tested, you can do that by finding colleagues at your
Mhm.
current companies or former companies, people that you've worked with, and asking them, hey, I'd love to buy you some coffee. I'd love to take you to lunch, and I'd love to learn about your job and just understand it. I think the same thing is true. Usually, customer success is a little closer to the sales ecosystem, so it's a little bit more familiar, but just understanding the math and the logic behind the sales funnel and what all of the possible inputs are there. So those are kind of two tactical things. The final thing I would say is being a CRO is extremely entrepreneurial. You must be in the mindset of being a business owner, thinking about the business as a whole living being and how the inputs, the revenues in, have to be managed and maintained and cultivated in a way that is also profitable, right? And profit should not, personal opinion, many economists will disagree with me. Profit should not be the purpose of your business, but it is a byproduct that your business requires, right?
Yes.
So
Yes.
your purpose on this earth is not to breathe air, but I guarantee if you couldn't breathe air, you would not last for very long, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So thinking about that as a business leader, as an entrepreneur, as a creative strategist, the more you think about your broader business exposure and think about how you get creative, those things will always serve you well in CRO.
Yeah. Thank you. That was amazing. We have about 10 minutes and 3 questions. So I'm going to try to get through these quickly. Any advice for trying to get what you need from your leadership to help take your skills and company to the next level? I am
Mm,
struggling with extremely outdated thinking and a fear driven mindset and decision making from my boss, which
yeah.
proves extremely challenging and is demotivating.
Yeah. You know, I have a few things, and if you've been in my sphere for any period of time, I feel like you will have heard them. I repeat myself a lot. There are two things people hate: change and the way things are in that order. And so even if the company is old and outdated, the processes are old and outdated, the thinking is old and outdated, it's going to be the thing that everyone's comfortable with, even if they hate it. And change is hard. Like like I mentioned before, the cool thing about human brains is that we can get proficient at anything that we practice. That's because of habits. And habits are the things that our brains are hungry for. They want to be lazy because habits don't cost as many calories, literal calories. Change costs calories. If you think about the first time you've driven a car versus driving a car yesterday, like your body is like, you going all the things, you aren't even half of the time you're like, I don't know if you've ever had that moment where like, oh, I actually don't remember part of that drive. It's because your brain is just doing it. You were there, but your brain is just doing it. The first time you drive a car, I drove a stick shift the first time I drove a car. I was like, okay, 2 feet, pedals, this mirrors, people, right? You're going like 3 miles an hour. It feels like you're going 3,500 miles an hour. That's change for everyone. And so if you have a team that is pressing against change, there are a couple of things that you can do. One is lead by example. One is be empathetic and caring about change, and be consistent. We have to be kind and consistent. Children, pets, colleagues, clients, we all operate the same way. We operate through clarity and consistency. If you have a puppy that's piddling on your rug and you consistently pick it up and put it outside and say, this is where you go, and you do it every single time, eventually that puppy realizes, oh, let's maybe just go outside because I keep getting put outside. I'm going to just go outside. But if you are inconsistent about that, puppy doesn't know any better. Or if you just don't address it, puppy doesn't know any better. It's not usually a malicious thing. It's just a lack of consistency or a lack of understanding or a lack of clarity. So my recommendation for you is lead by example, be kind and empathetic, go slower than you probably want to, and be consistent. And remember that most of the time people do things out of fear. And so if there's decision making that is demotivating from your boss, they might be afraid of something. So, turn on your spidey senses and your inner therapist and try to figure out maybe what it is that they're afraid of. Happy to talk more about that if you want to ping me online.
Thank you. How can a CCO turn CRO ensure that their customer-centric mindset does not lead to potential conflicts with aggressive revenue targets? Oh, that's a good one. These are all good ones. So thank you.
Very good. I think this is another thing around understanding value, right? Ideally, as a CRO, you have depending on the size and shape of your company, but ideally you have somebody whose job it is to manage and hold the sales team to their targets. I am currently that role right now. So I have to work with our team to help make sure that we're setting targets that are aggressive based on our past performance, and that I'm also helping the whole team understand why those targets are achievable. And I think that that's where the customer-centric mindset comes in, and our clever way as CS leaders of understanding value. And so there have been many, many things that I've done at this company to help adjust our ability to hit those aggressive revenue targets, such as rethinking how we're actually selling. If we were selling, we're a services company. So if we were selling time and materials, that means for every hour we log, we make X dollars. There's no flexibility there because as a time and materials contract, I give you 100 hours, you give me $100. It's more than that, but you get the point. If I help our company transition to an outcome-based selling model, now I'm getting clever with value because I know that our people are super smart and they're really fast at some of this stuff. Some stuff they're going to be creating for the first time, but a lot of it they actually really, really know. And so if I say this outcome will be delivered to you within this time frame for this investment, now I have more flexibility as a business owner. I can say, hey, this is the investment, this is how much this is worth, and I can use whoever will get the job done to do it. And that gives me more flexibility on my margins. And also my revenue targets, right? I can sell something that is an investment differently than I can sell a bucket of hours. So I think that's probably the best way that I can start to answer that question is get creative about if this is the target, what do we need as a team to be able to make that target accessible? And then go get it. I
Thank you.
promise I'll answer the last one in 2 minutes.
I'm sorry.
I said, I promise I'll answer the last one in 2 minutes.
No, that's okay. We could go like a minute over. So the last question is by Asha. What key skills um,
With
from
regard
a
to,
revenue perspective do you recommend CS leaders hone in on? Revenue retention is key these days for all CS leaders.
yep. Um, keep measuring things. Keep tethering all of your activities back to revenue and revenue retention. Keep contemplating that as a value exchange with your customer. And then think about that now in the sales frame of mind and the marketing frame of mind, right? At the end of the day, we're all trying to help our customers recognize, understand, commit to, and exchange value for something that our product or service does. And that is the nice thing about the revenue office is that it is actually consistent across that spectrum. It's just looking at it from a slightly different angle. So I would say the skills that you would hone in on, again, are knowing how to measure a business more broadly than just customer success, and learning how to understand the problem from the marketing and sales perspective, as well as the customer success perspective. I hope that helps.
Thank you so much, Emily. Wow, this was such an engaged audience. Thank you so much for all your questions. Emily, take a second to look at the chat. A ton of great comments about your presentation. We so appreciate you being here today and truly giving the best advice ever for leaders and for people that just in general want to grow their career and how to have that general mindset. So thank you so much for sharing today. Everyone, we hope to see you next month. We have another one coming out in 4 weeks, and watch out for that announcement. But thank you so much today. Thank you for your questions and your engagement. This will be out on YouTube in a couple of days, so please share. I think these insights are extremely relatable to everybody. So we hope to see you really soon. Thank you so much again, Emily, and we'll talk really soon.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks,
Bye,
Swati.
everyone.
Bye.